Welcome to Making Things Right, where we are rethinking the Christian response and responsibility to LGBTQ+ people. I'm your host, Brian Nitzel. If you're tired of the debates and division around faith, sexuality, and gender, if you're ready for more productive ways to engage and solution together and finding our Christian common ground and loving our LGBTQ+ neighbor, then I think this is for you. So welcome to the table and welcome to Making Things Right. This is our second episode exploring the Christian response to transgender people. In this episode, you'll get to know the amazing journey of Mark Wingfield, a Baptist pastor whose 2016 post went viral and launched him on quite an unexpected journey. He refers to himself as the most unsuspecting advocate for the transgender community, and he implores us to push through the misinformation to know and defend trans people at risk. This is an important conversation where I came away changed. So join us as we explore what's at stake in loving our transgender neighbors. This month, Making Things Right has been really intentional to focus our efforts on the awareness and the advocacy of transgender people. A couple weeks ago, in a similar event, my friends Grace and Lucas came. They shared their hearts, their stories, and their perspectives. Really helped me and us sort of get in their shoes a little bit about what it's like to be both Christian and transgender. And I really encourage you to hear their stories. And the recording of 2 weeks ago, if you missed it, is at my YouTube channel. But tonight we turn to advocacy and, quite frankly, the urgency of it. In preparing for tonight, here's a few things that I learned from our featured speaker, if you don't mind me quoting you a little bit, Mark.
Sure.
You said that trans advocacy is harder now than when you began 8 years ago.
Yes.
That today being homophobic is no longer acceptable, but being transphobic is acceptable. That there is an evangelical and political war on trans people, and they're winning, and they're creating a boogeyman. And there is a whole lot of myths and misinformation and disinformation. And so tonight, we're going to explore the real story and how we as Christians can and must respond to the current landscape for the sake of our trans neighbor. And so to help us doing that is our good friend, Mark Wingfield. So thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. The thing I need to say up front to everyone is I'm not here to tell my story. I'm here to represent the story of my friends and people I've met along the way. And because of that, I'm probably going to be emotional because I'm a crier. And as Brian mentioned, I believe this is urgent, and I believe lives are at stake. And so you'll probably see me cry some tonight, and you'll probably see me sniffle some, because even though I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about people who are dear to me, some of whom are on this call tonight, others of whom are not, people who have been more vulnerable with me than anyone else I've ever met in my life, and opened their lives to me to become an ally and an advocate for them. And so just as the scripture says, we hold this treasure in jars of clay, the salvation, the knowledge of the gospel. I feel like I am someone who holds the knowledge of some bit of the transgender experience in a tremendous jar of clay.
Yeah.
And it is my responsibility to try to represent well as someone who is a bridge builder. But I've just got to be absolutely clear up front. I have tremendous privilege in telling this story.
Yes.
And so I don't want to pretend otherwise tonight up front.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I really came away from our prep session that's in a lot of respects, I felt compelled to lean into a better awareness of transgender people just for my own benefit, but because I think there's still, a lot of us, and not even just Christians, there's a fair amount of ignorance. So we'll definitely get to that. Before we do, though, I'd love to just set some context. We're going to dive into the meat of everything, but I'd love to just set a little context to just get to know who the heck is Mark? What's life today, your family, your job, a little bit of your church upbringing.
How
just
messed up is he really? Yeah.
Yeah. Give us the context of you.
So I was raised in a Southern Baptist family, most of my growing up years in central Oklahoma. I'm an only child. I come from a line of devout Christians, many uncles who were Southern Baptist preachers all over the place. I graduated from high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and ended up graduating from college there at the University of New Mexico as well with a degree in journalism, and shipped right off like a good Southern Baptist boy who was called to ministry to Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, and ended up working there as the director of news and information more than going to school. And I did about 3/4 of a Master of Divinity degree there, 66 hours out of 88. And then I got a job opportunity that took me to Atlanta to the Southern Baptist Home Mission Board, and
Oh, that's right.
then ended up from there at the Western Recorder, a weekly newspaper in Kentucky, and then the Baptist Standard newspaper in Texas, and then had this bizarre opportunity as a lay leader in my own church, Wilshire Baptist in Dallas, to become the associate pastor. Some of you would call me an executive pastor
Which is
there.
how I met you. I didn't even know you had this whole history of most of
Right,
your vocational history is journalism, not being a pastor.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I did that for 16 and a half years and loved every bit of it. Well, no, I
Awesome.
love most of it. It can be tough.
Yeah.
And then 4 years ago, very much unexpectedly, had the opportunity to come back into journalism right during the pandemic. And I had been on the board of Baptist News Global, a national nonprofit news service. BaptistNews.com is where we're located. And so I've been doing this for a little over 4 years now. I'm married to Allison. We've been married 39 years. We have identical twin boys who are both professional jazz players. One of them is in the U.S. Coast Guard Band in Connecticut, and the other is a composer, arranger, and saxophonist who lives in New Hampshire now, and recently from Miami.
That's awesome.
Happy to talk about all that offline if anyone wants to know
Yeah.
what they're doing as well. But I still attend Wilshire, where I was on staff
Yep.
for 16 and a half years. I still teach a Sunday school class every Sunday there. Other than
That's in
teaching
Dallas, right?
class,
It's
I
at
try to be
Dallas.
seen and not heard as a former staff member.
That's
That's
great.
the quick version.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I love that. And I asked you in the prep, if you don't mind, and I hate to truncate this because we could actually dedicate an entire call to this, but I would love to hear just your kind of your short version of Wilshire Baptist journey of inclusion, right, to LGBTQ plus inclusion. And the reason I mean, obviously we all care about that. It isn't transgender and specific of topic, of course, but the way that I found you was Sally Gary
Yes.
who is the executive director of a wonderful organization named Centerpiece. It's also based in Dallas. And I was getting to know her, and I was like, who should I talk to? And she's like, you should meet this guy, Mark Wingfield. And she gave me his book. And I'm like, well, I was all nervous. I'm like, well, let me read his book first. And I read your book, Why Churches Need to Talk About Sexuality. And it just kind of blew me away, just because it told the story of how you walked through a process of discernment and the learnings and the wins and the losses. And it just felt like this such a wonderful guidebook to a pastor to think about this stuff. So will you share a little
Oh,
bit about
sure.
that
Yeah. And
Wilshire
thanks for the book
Baptist journey?
plug. The book's still available everywhere
It's so
where
good.
fine books are sold. Why churches need to talk about sexuality. And it's been the most purchased book I've got 5 books, and that's by far the most purchased out there. And I'd love it to be purchased some more. It's also helpful, I think. So in 2015, well, again, I was the executive pastor of our church.
At the church at the time,
And
yep.
there's a series of things that led up to this that I won't go into because it takes long to tell that part of the story. We decided, the deacons of our church, we're a Baptist church, so we have deacons. We're a traditional Baptist church. We don't have elders,
Yep.
we have deacons. And the deacons decided, with a request from the deacon nominating committee, who'd been running into a problem, because there was a gay man in the church who had been nominated to become a deacon for 5 years running. And he was the most devout, deacon-like person you can ever imagine. But we were a don't ask, don't tell church, and we didn't have any way to deal with this.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing sort of got put forward. And right at the very same time, Obergefell happened in the summer of 2015. And so suddenly churches are having to decide, are we going to do same-sex weddings? And what will we do? Oddly, the debate became about, it's sort of Dr. Seuss like, would you do a wedding in the chapel? Would you do a wedding in the garden? Would you do a wedding in the sanctuary? Would you do it upside down? Would you do it laying
Right.
down? And people had all these bizarre opinions about what we should and shouldn't do. I had one church member come to me and say, I would be fine if we had a same-sex wedding in the sanctuary, so long as the couple who's getting married promised to never have sex. Oh, well, that's an interesting opinion. And someone else came and said, well, I think you can have a wedding in the chapel, but not in the sanctuary. Or you could do it off-site, but not or you could do it in the prayer garden.
Yeah.
And
There was no rule book for this.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
this is what churches were dealing with.
Yep.
So we appointed an 18-member inclusion and diversity study group to look at these issues. Now, some people got wad because, okay, we weren't looking at everything in inclusion. I mean, this was DEI life, but we were already way ahead on the race issue, except for some people in church who didn't get the memo. As a whole, the church was on board,
Yeah.
was very involved in racial justice, very involved in gender justice. We we ordained women since 1979.
Okay.
So a long history there. But we hadn't really dealt with this issue. So this 18-member group that ends up meeting for 18 months out of this, very thorough process. And I'm gonna fast forward for just a brief little side trip, and I'll come right back.
Yeah.
We could not have known then that the very neutral chair of that task force had a child growing up in our church who 6-7 years later would come out as transgender. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. No one knew this. No one could have predicted this. And so in the course of this study, we met, I'm trying to remember the number, over 18 months, I think we met something like 30 times. We were meeting almost every week for a period of time, did all sorts of reading, and this was 2015 into 2016.
Reading of probably all different perspectives, right?
To the extent we could find them.
Yep.
And there's much better literature. I mean, think about 2015. We came up with a bibliography, and Matthew Vines's God and the Gay Christian was a brand new book at the time.
Yep.
Colby Martin's Unclobber was just being published.
Yep.
In particular, on the issue of trans identity, there was not much there, just not much at all. There's so much more now than there was then, but there's still not enough on that particular issue. So it became difficult. And we weren't going to go to extremes on the far right, just really hateful stuff, and put that on the list. So our group did all sorts of reading, and we would come to meetings and have book reports. And then we had members of the church who were affected by this come talk to us, and a lot of study, a lot of praying, a lot of research. Along the way, we were probably 2/3 of the way through this, and it was May of 2016. And if you think back to the context of May 2016 and all that's going on in the national political scene and everything, someone asked the question in the study group, well, we've talked a lot about the L and the B and the G, but we've not talked anything about the T. Could someone help us on this? Well, we had a woman on the study group who is a pediatrician. We had another woman on the study group who is a geneticist. And so at the next meeting, the two of them made a presentation and explained transgender identity to us. And I said, I can tell you exactly where I was sitting in the room. I can see the whiteboard. This was 7 years ago. And it was 8 years ago. My brain was exploding because I thought, look, I'm a pretty well-educated guy. I've been to seminary. I read all the time. I think I know a lot of stuff. And I've never heard any of this. Why did I not know this?
Like, what's one example of something that blew your mind that they were telling you?
So I think the thing that blew my mind the most was her illustration, the pediatrician, that gender identity, which, as you all know, is not sexual orientation. Those are two different things. But gender identity is like the combination law, or it's like the, this is maybe not a good illustration to use. It's like the visuals on a gambling machine.
Like a slot machine.
Slot machine, that's what it's called. See, I don't even know the words for those things. Everything's got to line up just right to be what we consider to be heteronormative. But it doesn't always line up that way. It's chromosomes. It's the brain functions. It's 3 or 4 different things. And she explained all this on the whiteboard and drew it all out and said, for 98% of people, these things line up the way we're accustomed to them. But for another 1 to 2% of people, they don't. And there's a lot of variations in that. And I thought, well, my God, that makes perfect sense. So I was a columnist then for the news service I now run, Baptist News Global. And I went on a Wednesday afternoon and sat down at my favorite restaurant to work at for lunch. and wrote a column called 7 Things I'm Learning About Transgender People. And it began, I don't know any transgender people, but I'm trying to learn.
I remember that. Yep.
And then I explained these 7 things I'm learning out of this. And it was published Friday morning of that week. I woke up that morning at like 6:30 Central Time. It had been published at 5 a.m. Eastern Time. And my phone was blowing up, my email was blowing up, my Facebook was blowing up, everything was blowing up. My wife and I just described watching Facebook as being like watching your electric meter spin on a hot Texas day. It was just, it was just going crazy. And in short order, that column was viewed 1 million times. I've never had anything else I've ever written in my entire career that's been read that many times. And that led to an opportunity to give a TED Talk in Charlottesville, Virginia later that year. And it led to so many opportunities. But the main thing that happened is this. Immediately, I started getting phone calls, emails, text messages, Facebook messages from folks. And it always went like this. I read that you don't know any trans people. I'd like to be your friend. And that ought to get you teary. Because here are all these people, I mean, by the dozen, reaching out to me. And they would invite me to come sit with them for coffee or for breakfast or for lunch or dinner. And I would go sit, I would just listen because I discovered there was so much I didn't know. And I would listen to their stories. And I would weep with them about their pain because every one of them had been raised in the church. Every one of them had been raised in the church. And every one of them had been rejected by the church because of who they were. And the burden of that was overwhelming. It just absolutely overwhelming. And so I wrote a follow-up piece that was only read by 500,000 people. The interest was, I was on our local radio, public radio station with this. It was in all the major, it was in, the New York Times, Washington Post, all that stuff. And the TED Talk, if you go, it's still online, you can find it. It's called The Baptist Pastor and His Transgender Friends. And I tell just some of the stories. I tell some stories in there because I became to be so moved. So now in 2016, this is when there was the big move on all the bathroom bills. We're going to force people to go pee in a public restroom that matches the gender on their birth certificate. And thankfully, those didn't go very far, but they created a big kerfuffle. And so my column came out right in the middle of that. And the timing was great. It caught everyone's attention on that. And that gave us a platform to speak. Brian mentioned something earlier that I need to come back to. I think most of my trans friends, if I were to ask them if they were out then, if they had transitioned then, I think they would agree. In 2016, it was much easier it was not easy. It was not easy. It was easier then to be a transgender person than it is today because they were trying to stop you from using restrooms. They were not trying to kill you. And what's happening today is an effort literally to kill trans folks by denying them medical care. And we can talk about the stats on that in a minute if you want. That's why Brian says this is urgent, because what has happened since 2016 through the Trump administration and then the Trump administration's loss in 2020, and there is a direct pipeline from Focus on the Family in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to a whole network of advocacy groups. We've outlined all this in articles on our site at baptistnews.com. There's no denying it. They are the ones pushing this model legislation in states around the country to deny medical care to trans folks. It's usually focused on children and teenagers, but they've gotten bolder and now it's focused on everybody. And I personally know people who have fled the state of Texas with their children, their teens, to other states because they feared for their teenager's life, not being able to get the medical care that they need. And we're not talking about surgery here. I just want to be clear that one of the lies that's being told is that doctors are out there are, chopping off breasts on 10-year-olds. Well, first of all, think about that for a minute, right? That doesn't actually make sense. And no one's doing that. And no one's chopping off penises on little boys either. This is a scare tactic that's being used. When we talk about gender affirming care for minors, it's generally hormone blockers. It is it's a medication issue, and it's allowing kids to identify with the gender they know in their hearts they are. It's not big. It's allowing them to dress in their known identity as well. This is much more offensive to the people who want to be offended than it is, dangerous to someone. who's going through it. So
Why haven't, because I remember you saying before about like how if you wrote an article like you wrote 8 years ago
oh yeah.
today, you'd get 16,000 people to read, not a million people. Like, why? I mean, I'm sure a lot has
We've
changed,
got
but like
fatigue.
why is it so much more difficult to
Yeah.
be trans today, or to even want, or for people to want to even talk about it? Or like what
Yeah, thanks for that
what are
reminder.
the key things in that
Yeah.
8 years? Are there milestones in there that you think are important for us to know? Or just like, why is the current state so much more difficult?
So 2 or 3 answers to this. And the illustration I gave Brian was that article that had 1 million views. If I were to publish that same article today, it might have 10, 20,000 views. Anything I write today about trans issues, trans awareness, sometimes they don't even get 1,000 views. People are not reading them. There is fatigue on the issue. That's one thing. There is fatigue on all the social issues. Trans identity has taken a backseat to overall LGBTQ inclusion, but more importantly, it's taken a backseat to the abortion debate and several of the other really important debates about democracy itself. And so it really gets pushed down. And the people who are pushing the anti-trans legislation, I mean, in my state, right here, just a few miles from where I live, we have one of the top research hospitals in America, University of Texas, UT Southwestern Medical Center. And they are a state-funded hospital. And because of our state legislature, they had to close their gender care clinic. And you have all these kids, teenagers, and adults who are no longer able to get care there in the way they did because our state legislature said it's immoral. And these are religious arguments being made about medical issues. So there is fatigue, there is meanness in the air about it. And the bottom line is that transgender people represent such a small segment of the population, and they are generally voiceless and overlooked, that it is easy to persecute them and get away with it because they do not have the capacity to bite back.
Right.
And that's why it's up to people like us to join them and be their allies and stay on top of this and be aware, because what's happening here is the severe persecution of a minority of a subset of a minority in our population.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah, that's really good. Let's talk about misinformation or disinformation.
Yeah.
I was at a conference in April where this wonderful transgender woman, Paula, I can't remember her last name.
Stone White.
Yeah, thank you. I always think Paula Cole, but that's a pop singer. Anyway, okay, so Paula Stone White. And she got up and just gave this amazing, history lesson. I don't know how she did it. It was just one of the best
She's
talks
fabulous.
I've heard in a really long time. But she made a comment that I've never forgotten. She goes, "We're the enemy that doesn't exist," or how you said the other night, you called it the boogeyman.
Right.
What are some of the key myths, misinformation, or even disinformation that you think are especially problematic that we need to change our minds about?
I want to compare this to another controversial topic, and that's the abortion debate.
Okay.
We can have a debate about abortion in certain circumstances, but things have gotten so drastic in this debate that the far right is pushing for an abolition of all abortion, which includes a lot of medically necessary things, and claiming things are happening that are not happening. After birth abortion. Well, yeah, that's murder. No one's doing that, but they've created this boogeyman of something that sounds horrific, right? It reminds me about that old joke that I learned as a kid, of an earlier era in life where a political candidate was running for local office and his opponent started a whisper campaign against him by saying, "Did you know his sister is a thespian?" Do you get it?
Yes.
Okay. Thespian, lesbian. Yeah. All right. But it's intentionally trying to mislead. So the difference between disinformation and misinformation
is the intentionality behind it.
Right in there, it is intentionally trying to mislead. And so you hear all this talk, this screaming talk about elementary age children being mutilated. That's the word that's used. Mutilated, massacred, ruined in their lives, as if someone's taking a scalpel to them. But that's not happening. That's not what gender affirming care is for a 10 or 12-year-old. That's just not the real issue. And so you can create these scare tactics out of these horrific scenarios. All you have to do is say they're happening. And then we're in the position of having to refute that and say, but no, they're not.
Would defend it. Yeah.
So just it gets pushed out. So this mutilation language is one thing. And then there is a biblical problem here. And the biblical problem is some folks are acting like the Bible says it is blasphemous to be transgender. And the reality is the Bible doesn't say a darn thing about this. There is nothing in the Bible about being transgender. In fact, you could make a case. Some people say the reference to eunuchs is the closest thing we have in the Bible to transgender identity. And the illustration that is used that I love the most, and I know most of y'all have heard this before, Genesis says that God created the light and the darkness, the day and the night. And yet in our existence, we know that there are shades of gray in there. There's dawn and there's dusk. And the Bible, especially Genesis, is not a book of science. It's not a book that tells us a first-person account of creation. It is a book of theology that tells us God created. And in that, there are things that God created that have variations and shades along the way. And gender is one of those. And we've actually known this for millennia. It's just that we see more of it now. And for later, let me put a peg on that. Why is this more of an issue now than it ever has been before? That's an interesting question. But the misinformation, the disinformation is really most often based in scare tactics. And this goes into the library bans, the book bans, and the teaching. And some of the folks I hear have the crazy belief that they're going to send their kid to a public school and the teacher is going to lead them to believe that they're transgender. And again, I just don't think that's happening. And the other thing I say all the time, if you ever talk to a transgender person, nobody in their right mind would choose to do this just to get attention. It is way too hard. It is way too painful. You give up way too much. It's just not something you would do. And every transgender person I've spoken to, I'm talking about hundreds of people here, has told me that they knew when they were 3, 4, or 5 years old, that they were not in the right body. And what they lacked was the vocabulary to say that. They didn't know the words. And only as they grew up, and again, the internet has changed everything because you can research stuff you used to have to go to the school library to get, and you didn't even know what to ask for, right? Or the public library. So the internet has really helped us on this and given us language to use on this. But the overwhelmingly common story is that folks knew from a very young age that they didn't somehow match their body, their parts and their brain, didn't match. And they often go through the teenage years trying to justify that different ways. It's very common for a trans person to first of all say, well, I think I'm gay. I must be, but that's a different issue because sexual orientation is not gender. One of my friends explained to me that she had to come to grips with her gender identity before she could even think about her sexual orientation. That they just are really quite separate. And you'll see all sorts of variation in there. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
And a reminder to everybody, as you can tell, probably anything goes here with Mr. Mark. So if you have any questions, throw them in the chat and we'll take a shot at them. And if you don't mind,
I'm not afraid of any words.
Right. But there's so many things like parent consent and blah, blah, blah. So like any questions you've got, drill them, and I'm sure he'll know a thing or two about it. But here's a good one. Like on so many issues in our country, it seems like this is one where people go to extreme positions. Do you see any opportunity for nuance in this conversation? It feels like both sides make the other out to be a boogeyman. Do you have any thoughts on how we can help facilitate conversations with friends and neighbors versus shouting matches?
So I think the number one best thing that can happen to anyone is to meet some trans folk and talk to them. Listen to their stories. My life was changed by listening.
Me too.
That's the number one thing that's got to happen. Most people in America have never met a trans person.
Yep.
Or they
that's
haven't.
Not just Christian. That's not just Christians statistically.
It's just everybody.
U.S. and America. Yeah.
Right. And that's not only because they're a small percentage of the population, but it's because most of them are hiding. The last thing they want to do is talk to you about this. And so you may know trans people and not even know you know trans people. right? There's this stereotype that no one's able to pass, the language is able to pass to look like the gender that they believe they are. Well, there's a lot of people who pass really, really well. And you just may know someone you don't know. So listening is number 1, 2, and 3 answer to this question.
Yeah.
The number 4 answer is get some facts.
Yes.
Get some actual facts from medical practitioners. There's a beautiful article I just downloaded last night.
I was going to ask you some of your favorite resources.
And printed out. It was on Apple News. And I'm trying to remember what. Oh, it's from NBC.
Yeah.
And it's about this doctor who works at Children's Hospital in Minnesota, and about the waiting list she now has for gender affirming care for children and their families. And one of the things that's happening out of this is the demand is so great because stuff is being shut down in places like Texas. And so you got to travel to another state to get care, which is very expensive. And most of the time, insurance will not cover it because it's way too controversial for them. And so what we have is a class divide where only the wealthy are able to take care of their children. And why does this matter? It matters because the suicide rate among untreated children and adults with gender dysphoria is in the high 40%. It is one of the most severe suicide rates in America. Now, some people come back and say, well, clearly they're mentally ill. That's why they're killing themselves. Well, first of all, that's an awful thing to say. Second, it's not true. There is a myth that gender dysphoria is a mental illness. It is not a mental illness in the same way other things are mental illness. It is a medical condition. It is not a delusion. It's actually being forced to live and identify in a body that you know is not your own. And you would have mental problems too if you were forced to do that. So that's why it's not the same thing. There are available therapies, there are available treatments. And the suicide rate goes way, way down. Yeah. Once there's appropriate recognition and care available to someone. So you just can't, it's the equivalent in the gay community of saying, we don't want you to have access to PrEP, but why is there so much HIV? Right. You're cutting off your nose to spite your face just because you want to be mean. And there's a lot of cruelty to this. And so the fifth way I would say we address this is we help show some kindness and reduce the vitriol that's happening on this, because most of the people who are talking about transgender identity, they don't know what the heck they're talking about. They've been listening to Fox News. They've been reading Focus on the Family. They don't know anything, but they think they know everything. They are armchair quarterbacking all this. So here's one clue, and I told Brian sometime later we'll talk about some language on this. Yes. If you hear anyone using the word transgenderism, you better shut them down and run the other way, because that is a pejorative word that is used by the far right to denigrate and degrade transgender people. Transgenderism is implying that transgender identity is an ism. It's an illness. It's a sickness. It's something wrong. It's defective. A condition to be fixed. It's a condition to be treated. And it is an identity. So we talk about transgender identity is the better language for that. So those are my 1, 2, 3. I love that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first 3 are know a trans person, get to know trans people. Number 4 is get educated. That's right. Number 5 is be kind. And I'd love, and we won't do it tonight, but I would love to do an exercise on number 4. What are Mark's, I'm going to hit you up afterwards. Yeah. What are Mark's top 10 or top 5 myths and misinformation? And then what's the corresponding true narrative to it, right? Like, let's get, be interesting to go after. So I can hit those real quick. Please. I can top of that. Myth number 1, God created male and female only, and there is no, gender is binary. What the scripture says in Genesis is not God created male or female. It says God created male and female. And like my illustration of darkness and light, dawn, and dusk, there are variations in there. The next myth is that this is all made up and that people are trying to get attention. No one would do this. The next myth is that we are mutilating children. That's not true either. The next myth is that people are grooming kids to become transgender. Dear God in heaven, why would anyone do that? I've never seen that. It's just, it doesn't even make sense. But this is the way some people's minds work because they're so suspicious about everything. And the fifth thing is like unto one of the others. I lost count of the numbers.
I think you're,
And that is
5.
that the Bible prohibits this.
Hmm.
Show me a Bible verse. I mean, and the other thing I often say to people who want to talk about any of this stuff is, you know what? Let's have a Bible study. I'll sit down with you and let's read through the Bible. And you show me what you think matters, and I'll show you what I think matters.
Are there any, what are signs of hope here? Are there any signs of hope? Are there any signs of progress that you see? Or is it all going in the wrong direction? What?
Yeah, no, there are some signs of hope. And the number one sign of hope is everyone on this call right now. The fact that you're taking your evening and you care about this, whether you are trans or your child is trans or your grandchild is trans or you're just an advocate or an ally, there's increasing awareness among people like us that we've got to step up out of the shadows and be there for folks. This is a tremendously hopeful sign. The second sign of hope is that more and more people are coming to grips with their gender identity and coming out.
Yes.
Despite the consequences.
Yes.
And they're finding freedom and they're finding hope themselves and they're encouraging others along the way. Trans people help other trans people along the journey that they've been on, and they need us on that journey with them as well. But there is an upshot in people identifying as trans, and there's several things behind that. I'm taking a little side trip here. There's a lot of debate about what goes on to cause this mismatch to happen, maybe in utero. And what I first had some trans folk try to tell me that, there's studies about chemicals that my mother comes in contact with at a certain time in gestation. And I thought, oh, that's crazy. That's like a conspiracy theory. But it turns out there's actually some truth to that as well. But the other reality is there is variety in all of creation. God created variety, and it's a good thing. And more people are celebrating the uniqueness of who they are and finding their way out of that. I won't name names, but just seeing some of you here on the call tonight and knowing your stories. And the other bit of good news is there's a lot of folks who have very smooth transitions. We hear about all the awful ones and the people who get disowned by their families. But my wife and I had dinner last Friday night with a couple we had never met before. They have been friends for 40 years with my son's in-laws, and they met in a Catholic church singles group 40 years ago. And it turns out this couple has a trans child. And I actually know the person who this trans child's partner is and didn't know that this was it was a revelation. I don't think it was a revelation. It was a beautiful thing. And here's a case where parents, a sibling, a community of friends did the right thing and accepted this person right out of the box. Even if they had to say at first, I don't understand, but I'm going to learn. The best thing you can say is, I don't understand, but I want to learn. It's not enough. Even the father in this family said, it's not enough to say, I still love you, because that's not the same thing as understanding.
Yeah.
What trans folk need is people like us, their families, friends to come along. The other sign of hope is that in this younger generation, and there's some new data out today from Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, and Melissa Deckman's new book that's just out on Gen Z. There's tremendous new data showing that among the younger adults in American society today, there's so much more acceptance than in older generations like mine. I'm the tail end of the boomers. There's so much more acceptance because these kids have grown up amid more diversity and they're more open to that. And if their number can increase, that's going to keep making a difference. But we have some real trailblazers among us today, some pioneers in this. One of my trans friends transitioned in 1992 in Southern California. And I wrote the foreword to her book. She's had quite a journey, and there's more I can say about that I won't go into here. People have been doing this for a while. This is not as new as some people think. It's just come to our awareness now.
Yep. Yeah, it's more front and center. Here's a question for you, and I'm going to retranslate it a little bit. Can you address the issue of fear on both sides of this issue and a path through the fear? So when I hear that and translate it to myself, I think, what are the fears of transgender people, which you've stated some of them, and then what are the fears of more traditional thinking Christians or any Christians who just have a really hard time leaning in on this? Like what are the fears of folks that are not on board on both sides?
So I've got a very good trans friend on this call who has been posting on social media pretty regularly about her fears, and I'm just going to echo some of her words. There's a fear for her very life being threatened by access to care. So think about if you are in an automobile accident and you're a trans person and you're carted to a rural emergency room with folks who don't understand why your parts don't quite match what they expect.
Yeah, and don't want to understand.
And don't want to understand. What kind of treatment are you going to get there for your life-sustaining injuries? Let's say that hormones, the proper hormones, have saved your life, but your insurance company says, we're not going to pay for those anymore. Or your state says, you can't get those anymore. That's a real thing. So the very medication that's keeping you alive is going to be denied to you. What if you can't get your correct gender on your driver's license? And you get stopped by a cop somewhere and your driver's license says you're a male, but you look very much like a female to the cop who stopped you. That's not going to be a good situation. And it's just all of these things that cascade on top of each other. Can you get hired in a job? Can you keep the job you currently have? What would be the response for that? I've got one good friend who came out and transitioned while he was working for Frito-Lay here in Dallas. And they were the epitome of great about that. I've got another friend who transitioned while working for Southwest Airlines, and they were great about that. But yet I have another friend who more recently applied for a job at Southwest Airlines and got interviewed through a hiring process with an evangelical Christian who pretty much denied moving this person forward in the job because they were trans. So even if we have a corporate culture that's accepting, there can be people within that culture who are stoppers because they're working against the very corporate identity and agenda. So there's many, many ways to be afraid in this. You're afraid of neighbors, you're afraid of work environment, you're afraid of school environment, because people just aren't ready to accept you, or you think they may not be ready to accept you, right? On the other side, I'm a parent. I had kids who obviously went through all the phases of public education. And I understand that parents can get paranoid pretty easily, and they really want to protect their kids. But there is this fear that I'm going to send my kid to public school, or I'm going to send my kid to a liberal church. I've heard this one before, and they're going to get exposed to stuff I don't want them exposed to. And they're going to think thoughts I don't want them to think because it's too dangerous for them. What we're into now, and I've written about this recently, is indoctrination, not education. And there is a difference on that. So I have trouble accepting that. I do find more sympathy for a parent or a person who just is misinformed and has not done enough research and thinks things are happening that are not really happening. And y'all, I know some really well-educated, smart people who are vastly misinformed about transgender identity because they think they know things they actually don't know. Their sources are not good. And so that, I think, is the primary source of fear on the other side, and it's being stoked for political gain as well.
But I remember when we were preparing, though, like you talked about how like your expectations have had to change so much in the years, right? Like if you could just give people the care or whatever. But like you said, though, that people's capacity to understand here is small and it's limited, but most people have capacity for learning. So it's like, is it a willingness thing? Is it a like, again, it goes back to like, what can we do to help people get over fears?
So I'll use an illustration here that I've used in the past about relationships in general. And I think it's true about compassion and compassion fatigue. Most everyone knows what a Lego block looks like. That basic building block of Lego that's sort of thick and it has 2 rows of 4 bumps on it.
Yep.
And if you're building anything with Lego, you know that you have to attach the parts to that. And if you attach a little single Lego piece to that, you can get 8 on there. But there's some Lego pieces that are bigger than that, and they take up 2 or they take up 4 because they draw more bandwidth out of that. Our relationship capacity and our ability to be compassionate and caring about other things is like that basic Lego block. We've only got so much bandwidth we can get to. We've only got, maybe if we're generous, 8 bumps on our caring block.
Mm-hmm.
And if those are already taken up with every other thing that we're worried about or compassionate about, the homeless, the hungry,
Oh, sure.
the poor,
Yes.
all these things that matter, they all are important. They're all things Jesus talked about. We may not have any space or bandwidth for capacity for compassion for transgender folks. And it may be that we have to lay aside something else for just a bit.
Yeah.
To make room for this. We may have to make room for this because this is a group of people who need us badly.
It's so funny though, how, not funny, haha, but like so obvious that relationship and proximity just makes all the difference. And I can speak for myself, like and probably other people on the phone could say similar things, but it was not that long ago that I had no transgender friends. I wouldn't even say I had a transgender acquaintance. And the only one I did was the daughter of a friend who transitioned and had just a really tough upbringing and really bad experiences with mom and dad. And so it fueled all my stereotypes of like, well, that's what went wrong, you know, like, and I wouldn't have like consciously admitted that, but that's what I felt internally and believed internally. And I always had this sort of ignorance about, well, there must be something wrong. You know, there must have just been something wrong or some pieces didn't fit. And all it took for me is to meet Grace and Lucas and 2 other people and hear their stories. And I was done. Like I was completely done. Like, and I'm not saying it's that easy. I'm just saying like I went from being kind of mildly or definitely ignorant and mildly skeptical to like, I love these people. That's their story. I don't need to have an opinion about all this stuff. I just need to love them, you know?
And you don't need to know about their body parts either. You don't need to ask what's there behind the clothing and what they're doing with it. It's not anyone's business.
And it just really challenged me, like, what's my responsibility as a Christian, period? It's just at the end, or as a human being at the end of the day, is not to really determine what's right or wrong for somebody else. It's, you know, but I had those embedded biases and stuff until I intentionally got lucky enough to meet Grace and then a few others and then realize, you know, then my heart was able to change.
So you've highlighted another thing that I should have said as a myth, and that is a lot of heteronormative people assume that gay, lesbian, bisexual people know all about transgender people because it's all the same thing to them.
Nope.
And nothing could be further from the truth.
No.
Right. Because again, it's not sexual orientation. It is gender identity. And the reason transgender folks got lumped into the LGBTQ rainbow is because there was nowhere else for them to be. They latched onto a movement or got latched onto a movement that was basically non-conforming, non-heteronormative, and they got lumped into that. And so gay and lesbian and bisexual folks can be just as bigoted against transgender folks as anyone else can too.
Absolutely. Somebody just put a great thing in the chat. They said proximity breeds empathy and distance breeds suspicion.
Yeah. And Lucas said last week, one of the things that stuck with me is God judges hearts, not parts.
Yes. I love that. God sees our hearts, not our parts. And you know, it's kind of a odd practical question, but like if is there statistics on how many what percentage of the population would identify as transgender?
So these vary. The answer is we don't exactly know with any precision.
Right.
It's anywhere from 0.5% to 1%.
Okay.
Some may go a little bit higher, and there is evidence that it is increasing, but so is overall LGBTQ identity increasing.
Mm-hmm.
So the point is that you can see what a tiny fraction of the population that is. But when you look at it in raw numbers, it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they're not just Americans. And this is not an American issue alone. It is the human condition. Mm-hmm. And so you can just imagine, extrapolate this, what it's like to be a trans person in a refugee camp somewhere around the world. Yeah.
So what do you do? So you've talked a lot about what can and must we as individuals do. If you forget number 4 and 5, we know what the first 3 are. But let's go organizationally. Like, you were a pastor, like what can and must churches and church leaders do here?
So this is tough because this is slow. This is a slow bake. There is no microwaving on this one. Let me start by giving this example. When our church voted to become fully inclusive, we just sort of naively thought we weren't going to put up any banners or anything. People, gay and lesbian and transgender folks, they'll just know to come here. Well, they sort of did know to come here, but it took a long time.
I know. I mean, you were a Baptist church, mind you, like,
right. Yeah.
scare most of us.
They didn't believe us.
Yeah.
And they would come sit on the back row for months and dash out the door before the pastor could greet them because they just needed to know if we were for real. And particularly when you're dealing with trans folk and those who it's not just the trans folk, it is their parents, it is their siblings, it's their aunts and their uncles and their grandparents, it's their kids. There's a whole constellation of people who want to know, is it safe for me here? Is it safe for my family members here? And they are on high alert watching. And it may take a year, it may take 2 years, and you've got to be patient.
Yeah.
You've got to just be patient. In our church, just with gay couples, same-sex couples, it took, I think, 5 years, maybe 6, before we ever had a baby dedication of a same-sex couple. And we would have done it on day 1.
Yep.
But no one trusted us to do it at that point.
Yep.
And you can just, again, magnify that if you're a trans person along the way. And yet we've got a better reputation and a better track record now. But let me tell you what happened at our church this past Sunday and why this matters. Something we feared would happen all along. I teach an adult Sunday school class. I've taught it for 23 years or more. It's an intergenerational class. We meet down on the first floor of the church parlor. And someone came knocking on our door about 20 minutes into the class time Sunday morning with an urgent message for us that there was an intruder in the building.
There was a what in the building?
An intruder.
Okay.
A man with a backpack who had made his way to the 3rd floor was at the door of the class that is our most LGBTQ friendly class that Sally Gary is the director of, shouting, thinking he was Jesus, declaring that these people should not be in my house. He has a backpack on. And the message that came to me down at the other end of the building was, there's an unidentified piece of luggage in the hallway, and there's an unidentified backpack outside your classroom door. So after some consideration, I began evacuating the 50 people in my class out the back door into our columbarium, but thinking there probably was a bomb in the backpack. If this man was, our security team came, they did everything they were supposed to do. They couldn't get him to leave. They called the Dallas police, who came, handcuffed the man, arrested him, charged him, and hauled him off. There are 21 doors into our church building.
Yeah.
We're in a church building with 165,000 square feet of space, 21 doors. Now, on Sunday morning, we open a lot of them, but not all of them. There's still probably a dozen doors you can come in. It's hard for church to be a safe place in that regard. And so this shook everyone. I mean, it shook everyone from what I could tell. The threat that was there, that because we're a church that welcomes, because we're an inclusive church, that someone would want to come in and harm us. And suddenly, we white folks are having a bit of experience of what it's like to be Black in America, or brown, or gay, or transgender, and we're having to pay attention, in a new way. And this is what transgender folk live with every day of their lives. Yeah. They don't know who's going to harm them because the rhetoric has been amped up so much that it could be anyone they encounter unexpectedly along the way. It could be the grocery store. It could be at school. It could be at the post office. It could be eating lunch. It could be shopping for clothes. Yes. It could be going to the restroom. And most of us live with so much privilege that even as a white gay man, look at me. I don't experience any of that. None of that. Poster child. I experienced 2% of that as a gay man compared to my transgender friends. Right. And so you talked at the beginning about the urgency of this. It is urgent because it's deadly in multiple ways, and precious lives are at stake in this. You want to be pro-life? care about transgender people too.
You wanted to, I want to wrap up with a couple things, but did you cover language? Did you have more
Oh,
thoughts
so
about
let me say
language?
this. So I'm an editor, I'm a writer, I'm a word guy, right?
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier, transgenderism is not, don't use that word, please. Transgenderism, just wipe it from your vocabulary. Just like you would not hopefully say, well, the gays did something. You shouldn't say the transgenders do something, because it's not a uniform block of people in that regard. We're talking about one person and their identity. You can always just fall back on the language transgender identity, which is, by the way, a real thing. You don't have to put it in quotes like some of my conservative friends do to say, we don't really think this is real, but this is what they call themselves, right? Fancy
Actually
little
exists.
quotes on that, right? No, you don't need the quotes on that. It's a real thing. Transgender people are not transvestites. That is a very specific thing. Just get Klinger from MASH out of your head. That's not what we're talking about here. And so that is a wrong word. Transgender people are not drag queens. That's a whole other subset of things as well. Don't get them confused. And for God's sake, I mean, for the sake of all that is holy and righteous, do not call anyone a tranny unless you're involved in sex work. It's rude. It is a hugely pejorative term that has an identity in sexuality. And I think, that's the other thing I should have said earlier that reminds me. So many people are upset about transgender identity because they think of it as about sex, which that's your own dirty mind, y'all. I mean, this is not about sex. This is about who you are.
Right.
It's just, so get that kind of language out of your head. The other most important thing in the transgender world, there's something called dead naming.
Called what?
Dead naming.
Dead naming.
Dead naming. So let's say that my name was Sally, and I changed my gender identity and I'm Sam or whatever. That's an example. I want to be called Sam. It's my name. It doesn't matter if you're my mother, father, brother, uncle, the doctor who birthed me. Do not call me Sally, because I have chosen my name. And throughout Scripture, we find that names matter. Names are holy. Names speak of God. The name of God matters. The name that people are given by God. All of these things are holy. And if you do not have the respect to call someone by their proper name, you shouldn't even speak. It is absolutely one of the rudest things you can do to dead name someone, and it will send people spiraling. It's so traumatic. Are you going to call Paul Saul in the New Testament? All right, there's an example of that as well.
I love it. Number 5.
I could go on and I'll stop right there.
I know, it's all good. Number 5, be kind. Number 4, get facts. And the top 3 are no trans people.
No trans people. Yeah. For anyone watching now or later, I really am open to conversation. My email address is very easy to know. It's Mark, M-A-R-K, @baptistnews.com. I answer all my emails.
He does.
Send me an email. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. And if you go search our website at baptistnews.com and look for transgender, you will find a whole lot. A whole raft of articles.
Some well read and some not well read.
Right.
Don't let the count fool you. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So all that's available there as well. And
I'll definitely huddle up, everyone. I'll huddle up with you, Mark, after this to kind of get sort of your favorite resources. So when I put a follow-up email out to all of you, I'll kind of curate some resources to get started, especially on the facts stuff. So thank you so very much. Thank you, everyone else, for joining the call. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful night. We'll get you a follow-up email with some resources.
Thanks, everyone.
Hopefully in the next couple days. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Brian Nitzel is an author, speaker, and thought leader. To learn more, visit makingthingsright.org or follow him on Instagram @Brian Nitzel.